Thank you again to our witnesses. My good friend from Illinois put a lot on the table there, much of which, unfortunately, I was not briefed on. So, Director Wray, I'd love to start just by giving you a minute or two to respond if you would like, but I'd like you to keep it to a minute or two if you would.
Obviously, there's a lot to say, so I'll be very brief. I completely understand Congressman LaHood's concerns and everything he read. The main point I would make for today's purposes is that all of those problems, and they are problems, all of those compliance violations, and they are violations, predate all of these reforms that I was trying to summarize. And so my hope is that we will be able to show by working with the working group how these reforms will prevent stuff like what you described from happening again in the future.
Thank you, Director Wray. I'm going to direct my next question to Director Haynes and Director Burns. We spend a lot of time thinking about the mechanics and tactics of what conflict with China would look like, and we don't spend a lot of time thinking about the economics of tension leading to ultimately conflict, were that to occur. This is not current, but RAND did a study in which they estimated that Chinese GDP in the event of a conflict would contract by a staggering 25 to 35%. US GDP could contract by 5 to 10% if there was conflict in the Taiwan Strait. So the perplexing thing here is this is a country that really the sole reason that it has been able to achieve the economic growth that it has, to the point where today it's on an aggregate basis the largest economy in the world, has been engagement with the world. Licit engagement through trade and other things, and illicit engagement through the stealing of IP, the manipulation of currency rates over time, et cetera. So I wonder, two-part question, can you paint a picture of if tensions continue to be exacerbated, leading to a point where there is conflict, what that would look like for the global economy, for the Chinese economy, and most importantly, help me understand why a Chinese leader would risk the golden goose, essentially.
I'll start. So I think to your point, Representative, it is not our assessment that China wants to go to war. And that is something I think to start with. In other words, they are, we continue to assess that, for example, even with respect to Taiwan, that they would prefer to achieve unification through peaceful means as opposed to through a use of force. They nevertheless are utterly committed to unification, and I think that is the challenge. In other words, she has made it quite clear that that is something that has to happen. And as a consequence, if they believe that peaceful unification is not an option, then they are in the potential for actually trying to achieve it militarily, and they are certainly planning for that potential. And then in terms of the impact that it would have, I think, obviously it depends on what the conflict looks like. But to your point again, I think it's absolutely right that this is, any conflict is likely to have enormous economic implications. And one of the things that we have certainly looked at and that others, within the government, Treasury and Commerce and so on, have looked at is the implications with respect to Taiwan of a disruption of their materials, particularly their semiconductors. And we've, studies show that it would actually have an absolutely enormous implications for the global financial economy if there were disruption to Taiwan's semiconductor production. Because really, Taiwan, the semiconductors, the chips that come out of Taiwan are present in virtually every category of electronic devices around the world. Leave it at that.
Director, I know CIA conducts economic work and economic assessment, so I'd be interested in your view.
Sure, and Justin, I would just add two examples to what Director Haynes said in terms of the calculus of the Chinese leadership, both on Taiwan and in terms of its relationship with Russia. I think on Taiwan, well, as Director Haynes said, we don't see evidence today that she has made a decision to invade Taiwan. I would never underestimate the ambitions of the current Chinese leadership in that regard or their determination. I do think that nobody has watched more intently Vladimir Putin's experience in Ukraine than Xi Jinping has. And I think he's been sobered to some extent, at least it's our analysis, by the extent to which the West was able to maintain solidarity and absorb some short-term economic costs in the interest of imposing even greater long-term economic costs on Russia. That's something that President Xi has to weigh as he comes out of zero COVID, tries to restore Chinese economic growth, tries to engage with, the rest of the global economy. And I think that also, weighs in his decision about whether or not to supply lethal equipment to Russia. We see clear evidence that the Chinese leadership is considering that, not that it's made a decision, not that it's begun lethal shipments. But there again, I think that economic factor, as Director Haynes said, has to weigh significantly in the calculus of the Chinese leadership.
Do we believe that the Chinese leadership sufficiently appreciates, even were they to supply lethal weapons, that would have economic consequences? An awful lot of people around the world would be much more hesitant to do business with China. Do we believe that the leadership in Beijing understands how that is a first step towards, again, killing the golden goose that has allowed that country to grow economically?
I think the only thing that I would highlight, Congressman, is that I think it's been important that European leaders have spoken up on this issue as well, because I think for a long time the Chinese leadership has assumed that it could drive wedges between the United States and our European allies on an issue like this. I think the fact that several prominent European leaders have spoken out directly about this is a very important step.
Thank you. Second category of questions is on technology, and I want to be respectful of my colleagues' time, so I'm going to direct the questions to General Nakasone and General Barrier. I had the opportunity last week to visit CIA and see the work that's been done by the director in terms of technological innovation. Director Burns has made it a strategic priority. He hired somebody from the outside to be chief technology officer. The visit was amazing. This new chief technology officer cleared out offices, created an open floor space. There's free snacks. They're just missing a millennial playing the guitar to reproduce what you see in Palo Alto every day in the middle of CIA headquarters. So with that as context, what are you guys doing? I'll start with you, General Nakasone. What are you guys doing that is as tangible as what CIA has done to make sure that we are at the cutting edge of technological innovation?
One of the things we've done, Ranking Member, is look at different partners. This is the key piece of what we've learned from Russia, Ukraine. The private sector has been incredibly helpful in terms of where we need to go in being able to thwart what Russia has attempted to do in Ukraine. We've opened up a cyberspace collaboration center, an unclassified building where our analysts go to engage with the private sector and members of the defense industrial base to do two things. One is to provide information in the defense industrial base in terms of what is going on in the domain of cyberspace. Two is to also get information from what we're seeing out there. What are the new leads? What are the things that we have to be able to emphasize? The coming decade is certainly a decade where cyberspace will be dominant. One of the things that we believe is that we have to have those partnerships that are so critical.
General Barrier.
Congressman, our innovation engine is really fueled by this thing called Neetopedia. This is where where companies can come in with great ideas on how they might be able to help the defense intelligence enterprise. We evaluate those ideas, we meet with those folks, and then we try to pull their ideas in. Our two major focus areas right now are AI and ML for our program called MARS, the Machine Assisted Analytic Rapid Repository System, which will revolutionize the way we do foundational military intelligence, really pulling in swaths of data to make that environment much richer for our analysts. And the other piece is really our MASN sensor modernization to be able to take all of those varieties of signals that are out there that are new and unique and be able to pull them into our MASN enterprise. That's the focus of DI.
Thank you. General Barrier, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you highlighted openness to outside companies that are not the traditional primes. I think that only gets you about a third of the way there, because I've just heard too many stories of innovative companies who just have no hope of navigating the acquisition process and authorities and everything else, even though they may have cutting edge technology far better than what would be. So I'm going to follow up with you on that and yield back my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.